go ahead and get started. So with the Climate Action Plan update, we are providing an update to our very first Climate Action Plan. So for those of you that are new to climate action planning, climate action plans are done by cities and businesses and jurisdictions around the world. And in American cities, there's a sort of general trend that climate action plans have two components: an emissions reduction component and a resilience component. The emissions reduction is really how are you as a city reducing your overall contribution to global climate change by reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Then the other component of a climate action plan is how are you dealing with the climate change that's already happening? And in Tempe's case, we have decided to focus on extreme heat because there isn't a lot of governance or rules or guidelines on how to manage heat in cities. We know we have other potential issues like drought, like flood, cybersecurity, bioterrorism, other issues that we need to be resilient to. But for the purposes of our first plan and this update, we've been focusing on resilience to extreme heat and really believe that that's something we need to do a lot of work in that space. So next slide. So in that first 2019 plan, if you haven't read it, you can read it at tempe.gov/climate action to see that document. We did a community emissions inventory using 2015 data and a municipal inventory. And really what these emissions inventories did is they helped us understand where the buckets of work for our climate action are. So on the municipal side, we understood, hey, we need to be working on buildings and facilities. We need to be working on outdoor lighting and water infrastructure. We need to be transitioning off of internal combustion engines and moving towards EVs, both for our transit fleet, meaning like the orbit buses, as well as our municipal fleet, meaning police cars, other cars and trucks that we use as a city. So that municipal inventory really helped guide how we're making climate action decisions in city operations. Then on the community side, the main thing we learned out of that inventory is that, close to 50% of our emissions come from our transportation system, which makes it so critical that we move towards a clean transportation economy and really do that mode shift away from single occupancy internal combustion engine vehicles and towards car share, transit, electric vehicles, and biking and walking. And so that was a huge sort of lesson learned out of this first inventory. It also taught us that, hey, a quarter of our problem is commercial energy, and we need to be supporting our business community in saving money and making those, those retrofits to their businesses. And we've had some great partnerships that have helped us with that. So this was critical in the first part of the plan to really get this sense of where are our city operations emissions coming and where are our community emissions coming from. Next slide. So then on the community side, that's the major component of the plan. We had 3 action areas, 2 for carbon reduction, energy and transportation, and then 1 for resilience in terms of extreme heat. Our Sustainability Commission selected 4 of the 12 actions that they really wanted council to move forward on, get action done, and show some success. And now in this next version of the plan, we've renamed those and broken them down into 3. So we have resilient energy hubs and resilient hubs, and you'll hear more about those. We have transportation demand management and mobility hubs. And then we have green codes and standards, which includes both green stormwater infrastructure standards as well as green building codes, specifically the International Green Building Code, which we'll talk more about soon. So these highlight actions are the same things from the initial plan. We need to continue to work on those. We haven't seen enough progress, and there's time to invest in policies and programs and personnel that move these highlight actions forward. Next slide. So when we thought about how to do this next update, we wanted to make sure we include more community voices, to the point that Barbie made earlier. So this update includes stakeholder-focused agendas, it includes the new greenhouse gas inventories, and it includes updated policy program and infrastructure recommendations. Next slide. So one of the things we know that's different between today and when we did adopted our first plan in 2019 is the summer of 2020. And what the summer of 2020 was 53 days over 110 degrees, almost double the previous record. And that summer of 2020 is going to potentially be an average summer by the 2040s. So we saw our future, and our future was hot, deadly, and horrifying. And what that means is that what we saw in 2022, and that being the average summer 20 years into the future, it taught us as a city and definitely as an office that we need to double down our efforts on carbon reduction and greenhouse gas emissions reduction, and we need to double down our efforts on resilience to extreme heat. 2020, the summer of 2020 was scary. It was sobering, and hopefully it taught us that if we want to have a healthy, livable, and thriving region, we need to do far more than we've done in the last several years. Next slide. Another thing that heat is teaching us, and that we're learning through our partnerships with Arizona State University, is that heat is not impacting our city evenly. We know that when we look at social factors for vulnerability in terms of percentage of residents below the poverty line, and percentage of residents that are people of color, and percentage of residents that are older, that a lot of people with those attributes are vulnerable to extreme heat, and there's a lot of people with those experiences living in the hottest parts of Tempe. So next slide. Oh, go back one more. So what that means is that we need to develop a whole way of doing equitable urban cooling. We need to figure out where is it hottest in our city, where are the most people vulnerable to heat, and then how are we making deeper investments in streets, in parks, in cool schools, in resilience hubs, in the targeted places where Tempe residents need it most. So it is very clear through this data that extreme heat is a racial equity issue, and therefore a social justice issue, and therefore a climate justice issue, and that we have to tackle structural racism and the issues of colonization that have created the city we have today. If we're going to cool it, we can't just cool it through infrastructure. We have to cool it through social change and social programs as well. Next slide. So one thing that I want to sort of remind folks of is that as we've been doing this climate action planning work, climate action has been happening. So I'm really proud of the work that Local First did as part of the Green Business Certification Program. They teamed up with the Downtown Tempe Authority and the 11 other businesses that DTA shares a building with. They went to their landlord, they did water audits, and they found ways to save water, save energy, and work with their landlord on making tenant improvements that were critical to making better businesses, but while saving water, saving energy, and taking climate action. In another realm, Unlimited Potential, a local nonprofit, was on the ground in Escalante neighborhood, in La Victoria, in Riverside neighborhood, in the neighborhoods near Gilliland Middle School, and they were doing sessions around energy equity and extreme heat. And what they learned was that SRP's Empower program, which is a cutting edge program and does some good work to make it manageable for residents to manage their bills, what Unlimited Potential found through this deep listening and bilingual engagement is that we have a lot of residents in Tempe that have a lot of ideas on how to improve the Empower program. So now we've had those conversations with SRP. They're coming up with ways to do that deeper listening, and we're making those connections on how we can ensure energy equity in our city through better partnerships between residents, nonprofits, the city, and our electric utilities. So that's already happening through this plan. Then on the city operations side, we've seen some fabulous work from Charlie Bladine, our facilities manager, and Grace Del Monte Kelly, our energy coordinator. They helped work with HDR to create a sustainable facilities plan, which is leading to energy audits and then energy retrofits, including in the Kiwanis Gym. And we see this sweet basketball game happening under brand new LED lights that are 1, saving energy, 2, reducing carbon emissions, and 3, making for better playing facilities. Unfortunately, I don't think it's helping with everybody's ups in that basketball game. Next. So to remind you of the climate action plan process that we've gone through, we did a listening phase where we did listening sessions with youth, with our climate justice community, with design professionals, with our business community, to really understand what they wanted out of this update. From there, that's where the idea of doing agendas that were actually co-created by nonprofits and by groups like the Tempe Chamber of Commerce, like Local First Arizona, and like Unlimited Potential. That's how we realized that's how our residents and businesses wanted the planning phase to go. We did that planning phase up in through the last fall, and now we're in the review and approval process. Next slide. So I'm about to hand it over to Andy. Oh, I'm going to do the business agenda, and then I'll hand it over to Andy for youth, climate justice, and neighborhoods. And so I'll walk you through what was in the business agenda. Next. Oh, actually, before we do that, before we get started, are there any questions about the intro that we just gave? Do people have any points of clarification or any questions about what we've delivered so far before we dive into the agendas? Feel free to unmute and speak out loud, or feel free to put something into the chat. Yes, the slides will be available to the public. We'll put those up. And then a version of this presentation will also be as part of a work study session that will go in front of council on February 17th. But yes, the slides will also be available. And then the plan, the actual physical document of the plan will be available in about 2 weeks, and it'll be available for the public for the 2 months leading up to final adoption. And there'll be an opportunity to make additional comments and additional suggestions via online forum once we have the draft document up. But we had a great recommendation from Autumn Johnson, who's in the audience tonight. She reminded us that the City of Phoenix had their draft up for at least 30 days before our meeting. So we plan to have our draft up for a considerable amount of time before the council votes on it. Great, and with that, feel free to keep on putting things in the chat. We'll go and get started with the business agenda. Okay, next slide, Andy. So Chamber of Commerce, Local First, and Tempe businesses created this agenda. And the why behind this is to support businesses in adopting energy upgrades that save money and grow Arizona's clean energy economy. Next slide. So what we heard from businesses is they really want us to be doing bread and butter sustainability work. They want our conservation program for commercial and industrial and institutional program to be easier to use, to be more widely used by businesses, to have more grants and rebates. So they were to do more audits. So they were really interested in just us doing more on the water conservation side for business. They were also hoping that there's deeper programs in energy efficiency for both APS and SRP, and that we are helping businesses really connect to the programs that SRP and APS has. So that's definitely very important. Next slide. Then there's the partnerships piece. So there was a real interest in more businesses joining the sustainability pledge for the city and more businesses going through Local First Green Business certification. Next slide. And then there was also an interest in businesses supporting transportation solutions. So we have one example in the picture below of cul-de-sac Tempe, where they have very little parking on the campus, and they're deeply investing in alternative transportation options. There was an interest in seeing more developers do that type of work and really making the connection that low carbon transportation isn't just good for the environment, but it's good for creating a vibrant economy and vibrant city. Next slide. And then, so now I'll send it off to Andy with the youth agenda.
Hi, everyone. The youth agenda was created by high school students, recent college graduates, and community members who work with Tempe youth. We wanted to provide a safe space for some of our youngest residents to voice their thoughts and share advice they had for Tempe. For actions, youth expressed a desire to address equity issues around food and transportation. For food equity, youth want to see school food programs that lower the cost of school meals. They would also like to have composting and gardening sites on school campuses. For the larger Tempe community, youth want healthy food to be accessible and affordable across all income levels and increase urban agriculture programs. For transportation equity, youth want public transit to be affordable and accessible, that we continue to work on accessibility issues, and that the city provides shading and water at transit centers and bus stops. For partnerships, there was an interest in making sure school boards and leaders are a part of climate action. There was an interest for school boards to involve students in climate action decisions, such as drafting and passing climate action resolutions and creating school programs that bring climate change education into the classroom. Some examples of school programs integrating climate action in schools are the Cool Kids Grant and the Climate Sensitive Urban Forestry Grant, which we'll get into more detail later in the presentation. The highlight action youth were interested in was green stormwater infrastructure, specifically increasing this type of infrastructure across school campuses. There's an interest in making sure campuses mitigate the urban heat island effect, practice water conservation, and provide shade. We used Riley Elementary as a best practice example. And as you can see, they have a cistern system and also a rain garden. For the climate justice agenda, Unlimited Potential, a grassroots nonprofit organization, worked in target neighborhoods to make sure that Tempe is working on addressing inequitable effects of climate change and climate injustices. For actions, residents were concerned about heat awareness and energy. They believe that investments need to be made in homes, including upgrading living spaces, incentivizing natural and clean energy, promoting water conservation, increasing native vegetation, and working with utility companies on their electricity billing. For community work, residents would like to support, they would like to see support for unsheltered people and would like opportunities to mobilize neighborhood action. Another action this group was interested in was land stewardship, which includes the indigenization of Tempe, meaning that we acknowledge colonization and value indigenous knowledge. There's also an interest in the land back movement, which seeks to have more indigenous land ownership. Another aspect of land stewardship is urban forestry and sustainable landscape. These include increasing tree canopy, promoting backyard gardens and regenerative agriculture, and planting more native vegetation. As for the type of partnership we have with Unlimited Potential, residents felt that there is an opportunity for the city to continue to hire community-based organizations to do more work in responding to climate change and climate justice and equities, supporting energy and resilience needs, and facilitating the relationship between the city and residents. The highlight action this group was interested in was resilience hubs and resilient energy hubs. A resilience hub is a community serving facility that supports residents through resource distribution and emergency services. A resilient energy hub is also a community serving facility equipped with solar power and energy storage. Envision Tempe, which is the city's pilot project, combines these two types of hubs. The center will provide resources that prepare residents on how to respond to emergencies, as well as provide shelter during times of emergency. This project would also provide services that target residents who need additional access to services and address economic inequality in our city. So for this agenda, it was created by residents across all of Tempe's neighborhoods to support them in improving neighborhoods through local climate action. This action that was singled out was resilience to extreme heat and ensuring we address extreme heat issues related to transportation, energy, urban cooling, and housing solutions. Some additional programs residents would like to see are increasing the city's tree canopy, equipping every bus stop with a bus shelter, and expanding energy equity programs. For partnerships, residents in this agenda were also interested in working with community-based organizations. They would like to work with organizations on projects that address transportation, water and energy equity, as well as community resilience. And they would also like to see more green jobs in Tempe. For the highlight action, residents also chose resilient energy hubs and resilience hubs. We used Puerto Rico's Mercy Corps Resilient Hubs as the best practice example. Each resilience hub includes community gardens, internet, disaster risk reduction, education workshops, off-grid solar energy, water, and emergency non-food items. And that leads us right into the proposed investments. So I'm gonna throw it back to Braden.
Yeah, before we get started on proposed investments, I wanted to answer a few questions in the chat. So one important one, I thought it was a great point from Alex about meat consumption and animal consumption. Right now, there's two ways. One, right now, the main way we're addressing that is to make a series of proposals around local food. As you heard from our youth agenda, our youth told us that they thought that we should have a lot more investment in local food access, production, and entrepreneurship programs. And so deeper investment in local food is definitely something that we are interested in doing if the budget is made available by the mayor and council to do that. I did add that our climate action plan will have a section called What Comes Next. And one thing to understand about this emissions inventories that we've done is they include what they call scope 1 and 2 emissions. So those are emissions where you flip a switch or turn an ignition, where you're causing the emission to happen in an action. Consumption-based emissions are often what they call scope 3 and beyond. And so those are emissions created by something you purchase or something that you consume. And so there's only about 10 cities in the country that have done a consumption-based inventory. And what we've said is, given enough resources in the next climate action plan, it would make sense to do a consumption-based inventory. And there we would really dive into what is the embedded carbon of the amount of meat that Tempeans eat, and what's the embedded carbon and amount of milk we drink. Those types of things are possible to get some general estimates of, and it's certainly possible. There's a lot of cities that have started, different vegan policies and different carbon reduction policies. But for us, since we haven't even really started a local food plan, that would be a lot to jump into right away. So we're suggesting we get a local food program started with pilot projects and staff. But eventually, you're absolutely right, Alex. We should be moving towards a consumption-based inventory and really starting to track the impact of what we eat and what we consume as a city. And there's certainly some leading cities that are already doing that. And then I wanted to address Autumn Johnson's question. It's a great one. I take it for granted. We have adopted goals. So the city has a community carbon emissions goal of being carbon neutral by 2050. And then we have a city operations goal of being carbon neutral by 2050 and having 100% of our energy come from renewable sources by 2035. So those are the goals on the books. We had this fall, we had a community goal of 2060. In joining this program called Race to Zero, we changed our carbon goal to 2050. So that was some good progress. I'm glad we saw that goal change as part that, that was sort of part of this whole process. So very, very excited to have those goals on the books. We do not have official goals on the books for electric vehicle adoption. That's certainly a recommendation that residents could make to the city, that we should have official goals for the amount of EV charging stations we're putting in, or the amount of goals for EV electric vehicles in the city. We have some internal city fleet goals, but we don't have official EV goals yet, and that's a very interesting suggestion. Let's see, good question. The next cap would probably be in that 2025 to 2026 range. So right now we're doing this 2022 update with 2020 data. We did 2015 data. If we were to do our next climate action plan based on 2025 data, then that climate action plan would come out in 2026. I think it's it's up to every mayor and council and the citizens that are working with them to decide when the next appropriate one is. We don't have we haven't made an official declaration of when the next climate action plan would be, but the target around 2025 and 2026 would make sense to me. There are no interims in terms of community goals. There's just the 2050 goal. We haven't, because these goals are part of our budgeting process. There's the budgeting process tends not to want us to have milestone goals, but just one long-term goal. So that's why that's happened that way in the past. Food waste, that's good. Yes, and Dawn, thank you for answering Alex's question. There's definitely, as I described in terms of who's affected by extreme heat, it is there are predominantly people of color or BIPOC residents in Tempe that do often are most affected by extreme heat and by climate change. And so there's a concept that we've been getting more exposed to in trainings that we've done through the Urban Sustainability Directors Network and through our Equity in Action program called Targeted Universalism. And the idea of targeted universalism is if you design a program or a policy for the group of people that are the most marginalized or the most hurt by the system, that you actually are designing a solution that helps all people. So by explicitly focusing on indigenous needs or specifically focusing on the needs of people of color in our community, we actually are being universal in doing that. The problem is if you say, oh, this is for everybody, then you'd be designing for the quote unquote average person in that group. Instead, what actually designs for everybody, if you design for the most specific needs of the people that need the most support. And so that's the reason we have a climate justice agenda. That's a reason that we are practicing targeted universalism. And that's a reason that racial equity needs to be deeply considered when you take climate action. Okay, so those are great questions. It's really good to have these types of dialogues and get to that understanding. It can be new for some folks. So let's get a little bit into proposed investments. So we have policies, programs, personnel, and infrastructure that we're going to be recommending to council. There's we were making 23 budget requests in the supplemental budget process in terms of asking for increased funding from the general fund. And then we're also going to be making infrastructure requests through the capital improvement process, which is the money that comes out of the capital budget for infrastructure. So on the policy side, we are recommending to council that they move forward with building codes, including the International Green Construction Code, as well as building code changes to support electric vehicle charging stations, as well as building codes to support solar readiness for all new Tempe buildings. So there's a real opportunity to use building codes to help accelerate EV adoption and solar adoption. On the program side, we're suggesting that cities start a new energy equity program specifically to be able to work more deeply with APS and SRP on meeting the needs of our residents with low income and BIPOC residents and other residents that have specific energy needs and energy insecurity issues. We're also interested, we're really inspired by the work of Watershed Management Group in Tucson and Ann Till in Tempe, who have done neighborhood green stormwater projects. You see here, this is a stormwater project we did with Watershed Management Group at Lemon and Dorsey, where we're taking water off the street and feeding a bioswale and helping provide shade for a bus stop. We want these types of programs to be available throughout the city. So we're making a budget request to fund every year at least $30,000 that gets spent on neighborhood green stormwater projects like the one in this picture. So we're really excited, and we have a variety of other programs, including local food programs like a backyard garden program, a food forest program, energy access roadmap to help us figure out how to have more, local food access roadmap to help us figure out how to have more local food choices in the city. So there's a lot of program suggestions coming out of this plan. Next slide. Then on the personnel side, we're making requests for 7 full-time employees. We know that we will likely not get all 7 of those funded. We are really hopeful that there's a way to potentially get up to 3 positions funded. One position to help support our community and neighborhood resilience work that Marcus has already started through grant funding. Another position and that's projects like the one you see here with Councilman Navarro, planting trees at the 12th Street and Mill median, doing tree plantings, doing school engagements, doing partnerships and neighborhood projects. There's really exciting work to be done in this place. Then there's also youth engagement. That's doing work with the schools, elementary, middle and high schools, doing projects, urban cooling projects, climate education projects, climate action projects. A lot of opportunity to do more youth engagement in the city. And then third is a position that could help us with policy at the regional, state, and federal scale, as well as help us with federal grants. So we'd be really interested to have a position in partnership with our intergovernmental officer, Marge Zilla, and we think that there's a real opportunity there. On the infrastructure side, there's a variety of infrastructure that we believe the city needs to continue to pursue. We need to find ways to increase the amount of transit shelters that are at our bus stops. One of the things our youth were very frustrated with the fact that our current budget only allows for about 10 bus shelters to be built a year, and we have hundreds that need to be built in order for us to cover all the need. So they very much saw the need for the acceleration of transit shelters. There's also a need to have more, we heard a lot about more safe and convenient bus transit. So there is an opportunity to invest in bus rapid transit on Scottsdale Rural Road. There's an opportunity to have that be a dedicated bus lane. And so that's a really exciting opportunity that would allow for truly 15-minute headways so that you could get buses up and down through the city very easily. That's an investment that is possible through the Prop 400 extension regional transportation tax. But that's something that mayor and council really need to continue to work at the regional and federal level to make that happen in a reasonable amount of time. And then there's also a really exciting opportunity with streetcar extension to take streetcar beyond Hayden Ferry and taking it all the way into Mesa to the Sloan Baseball Park and be able to cover all the way past the new Novus Center, as well as Tempe Marketplace. And that has a real opportunity to create more transit-oriented, sustainable development in the city. And then there's also an opportunity to continue to support Richard Atkins, our urban forester, in growing our urban forestry work. The other one that's not in here that's very exciting to me is continuing to invest in our green stormwater infrastructure as well. So next slide. So now I want to get to the city investments. So the city, for city operations, we have the opportunity to adopt policies and programs. We also, so to do that, mayor and council are going to have the opportunity to adopt a city green building policy. That would mean that all future buildings at the city use the International Green Construction Code. There's an opportunity to further implement the Sustainable Facilities Plan. There's an opportunity to invest in creating a workforce EV charging program, as well as completing. We have fully funded our EV fleet roadmap, but it's not complete yet. So there's an opportunity to adopt our EV fleet roadmap. Then on the infrastructure side, we have an opportunity to invest in energy efficiency and retrofits of city buildings, continue to invest in microgrids and resilient energy hubs, and then continue to invest in the electrification of our city fleet and transit fleet, as well as continue to work with APS and SRP on opportunities for solar. So this is really important on the city side. There's opportunity for the city to walk the talk. And we're starting to do that with programs like Envision Tempe, our first resilience hub on Apache, and with the new Fire Station 2, which we'll be building using the International Green Construction Code. I think it's incredibly important that we can't just be facilitating this work within our community. We have to be doing it in our city with our city operations as well. Next slide. Then this is an overview of municipal actions. So we have an opportunity to talk about what we've done in the city in terms of retrofits. Next slide. Outdoor lighting. So we've completed a lot of street lighting in neighborhoods and parks and area lighting. We still have some additional arterial major street lights that need to be put in. And then we haven't done all of our outdoor facility lights in terms of LED conversion. So there's a big opportunity here to continue to invest in energy cost savings and carbon reduction. Next slide. Water infrastructure. Pumps use a lot of energy. So there's an opportunity to continue to work on energy retrofits and renewable energy in terms of our water infrastructure. Our newest municipal inventory is showing that we have an increased percentage of our total carbon carbon emissions as a city is coming from our water infrastructure. So it's something we really need to invest in moving forward. Next slide. And then municipal and transit fleet. So we are the second most electrified fleet of any local government in Arizona, with the exception of Pima County. We plan on continuing to invest in our municipal fleet, as well as do the Valley's first EV bus pilot program. We have not achieved federal funding for that yet, but with the new infrastructure money, we're hoping to have our first electric vehicle bus pilot in the next several years. Next slide. So I did want to talk a little bit about, yes, we love city funding and it's great to have the city invest its own money in our work, but we have brought over $2.5 million in grant funds over the last 5 years. One of the recent grants we brought in is climate adaptive or sensitive urban forestry. That's helped us put in several projects at schools and the medians. You see the picture at the 12th Street median here. And it's helping us work towards our tree canopy goal, demonstrating the benefits of native vegetation and desert adapted trees, as well as helping us demonstrate bioswales and curb cuts and other green stormwater infrastructure. Next slide. And then with Cool Kids, Cool Places, Cool Futures, this is also called in the schools. It's called Neighborhood Justice. We are piloting this program at McClintock High School. It's helping high schools advocate for resilience to extreme heat in the neighborhood, city, and region level. The idea is eventually to inspire a regional cooling authority where we can figure out as a region how we pay for cool corridors, cool schools, resilient centers at the regional level. So the idea with this program is that we start at the school level, move to the neighborhood level, and eventually convince the entire region through youth engagement and youth empowerment that we need to invest more in resilience to extreme heat. So really excited about this grant. Marcus, who's on the call, has been an amazing leader in this. And we've had great partnerships to make this happen with Arizona State University, Unlimited Potential, and Tempe Union School District. All right, and with that, next slide. So in terms of next steps, we're going to be presenting to Mayor and Council about our greenhouse gas emissions update and our official budget recommendations in February. There's going to be the opportunity this spring for Council to approve the update. And then there's ongoing work to adopt policies, support programs, invest in infrastructure, and do continual engagement. So with that, we can go back to any questions and comments that folks have. Yes, it's true. The 72 line, that's what we're trying to make as a bus rapid transit line. We could have a dedicated lane with bus rapid transit where the 72 is today. I really truly feel that that's one of the major infrastructure investments that could really change the shape of our city and allow for a lot more residents to not have to have single occupancy vehicles, or at least reduce their use of single occupancy vehicles. To Autumn's question, fleet conversion, is it all new electric vehicles or electric? No, we don't have a policy like that. The idea is in the roadmap we're creating. We're shooting for 65% of our fleet, I believe it is, to be electric in the next 10 years. But that's not an official, that's a sort of internal goal that we have as part of our general carbon neutrality goal. It's not going to a vote in February. It's going to a vote, and I think it might have to get voted on twice, but it'll be voted on in the March-April timeframe. February 17th is just a work study session in front of council, where council gets a full presentation of all of the work. The actual voting won't be until the March-April timeframe. So it should be made public. Our hope is that the document will be made public around the February 10th timeframe, and so then it'll be open for close to the 2 months between between when it goes out and official adoption. Just trying to look for youth empowerment is great, but I'd like to see some efforts with generations that make a greater impact now. Do you think we could see some more dedication from generations that have a power to make it consider them later? Yeah, I think it's a really good point. It's something we've been talking about in our work, Alex, is that there really is an opportunity for multi-generational work in this. And so it's not to say, but the fact of the matter is that we've seen a lot of power and strength from our young people, and that what our young people want is adults to listen to them. So I do think there's a huge opportunity for middle school and high school students and college students to have their voices heard in Tempe City Hall and in Maricopa County government. There's a major opportunity for that change to happen. And I view it as an adult as one of my primary responsibilities to make sure that those youth voices and youth's interest in what our city and region become are truly heard. Public comment can be made to council at any of those dates. So the Sustainability Commission has been really passionate about making sure as many people as possible can make comment and make their voice heard as part of this process. So they will be communicating, the Sustainability Commission will be communicating out to folks to make sure that Tempe voices and regional voices are heard. And definitely there's always an opportunity to make comments on the comment card, which Shauna has just put in the chat. I'm looking here to see if I missed any questions. Oh, Nick, if you're still on, do you want to talk a little bit about the work you did this summer in the creation of the business agenda, and maybe a little bit about the green business certification and scale up?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to, Braden. Thanks. It was a real pleasure to be able to work alongside you on developing the business climate action agenda. And I think really the most powerful piece of that was the opportunity to invite businesses who have actually started to implement some of these measures that you were mentioning, especially regarding energy efficiency and water conservation, who are already doing this work. They had engaged themselves in the Arizona Green Business Certification and through our Scale Up program, which is our sustainability project planning series. And so be able to invite businesses who could speak on behalf of the benefits that their solutions were having for their business regarding their bottom line. So, you know, these businesses are reporting that they're saving money and they're improving their engagement with their customers and their employees because they're investing in the future of the city and the state. So businesses in Tempe who are engaging in these practices and also contributing to the climate action planning are saying, you know, we care about our business, but we also care about everybody else in the community. And we want to be able to have this as a place to live and grow and flourish for our children for generations to come. So I thought that was just so powerful. And yeah, we're very excited about making introductions to more businesses in Tempe that are taking this step in starting to measure their impact and wanting to make changes. And I think one other thing that I will add about the update is, and I think it was Lauren who had said this, that I don't know if anybody does community listening and inclusivity better than the city of Tempe. And so what we have here is something that is very well laid out, organized, exciting, and very transparent. And I think there's a lot of trust building that can happen here. And I'm very excited to see the actions that Tempe businesses and community members are going to take with this.
Thank you so much, Nick, and thanks so much for you for everything that you and your organization do to help facilitate businesses and residents in this action. And I think the profound thing that I've learned through this whole process is that the power of this work is really behind creating connections and creating support structures. And so whether it's the chamber with their pledge or Local First with their green business certification, or the outreach and deep engagement and bilingual engagement that Unlimited Potential does, the engagement that our own neighborhood services group does, the support they have for neighborhood projects that create real change in our neighborhoods in Tempe. So much of climate action in Tempe is about that sort of person to person, person to elected official, person to business work. And that's really, really exciting. It's been exciting to see that in this process. It's been exciting to see that in the last 5.5 years I've been here. Anyone else want to ask any other questions or share any other thoughts? I definitely want to encourage you to, I really appreciate, oh, excuse me one moment. Yeah, so I really encourage you to speak on behalf of the plan. I do think elected officials need to hear from you. I appreciate what Council Member QB said. But yeah, there's a great opportunity to stay involved and to make sure that this updates gets across the finish line. Any other thoughts or questions?
Hey, Braden, it's Barbie. I just wanted to share, I'm really impressed that we're going after the extreme heat because I moved to Tempe when I was 8 years old with my family. And I can remember as a kid going trick-or-treating on Halloween and we were freezing cold. We always had jackets on. It was very cold. And I think in the last 10 years, it's turned to it's hot. Nobody would ever wear a sweater. And it just shows you how much our environment has changed and how much the heat is going from our summers last so much longer. They're more like 8 months instead of 5 months. So it's really great to see us work on mitigating the extreme heat in Tempe.
Yeah, Barbie, I think you're right. I often say we are not experiencing your grandmother's heat waves. And, you know, these heat waves are earlier in the year, they're later in the year, they're deeper into the night, and they're hotter in the city. And so this is not the heat waves that we experienced, you know, in the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, even the 80s. So this is a new type of heat wave, and we can't build our city the same way we've been building our region for the last 60 years using parking lots and strip malls. We need to fundamentally build our city and our transportation system in a different way if we want to survive our city turning into Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. So we're going to be regularly seeing highs in the mid 120s for the rest of the decade at least. And we really need to do something about it. So it's a great point, Barbie. Thanks so much for bringing up. It matters so much to hear from people that are from here that have experienced this dramatic change in a very short amount of time. You know, I think it's important, and we have to find a way to work with our elected officials and our development community on this. So with that, I just want to thank everyone for coming tonight. I know you have choices on where to be. We really appreciate your time here. I do want to just give it back to Council Member QB if you want to say a few words of thanks.
Yes, thanks. Sorry. I'm just kind of relaxing here in my house because I have COVID, but feeling much better. Thank you so much to the staff and to the commission. And I'm glad you delved into the area of budget. There are going to be a couple of budget forums that are aimed at the public to understand the public budget process. So I think that's a good thing to attend. I think there's a couple coming up. I posted one. And I would just say, you know, and reiterate that you can get a lot of emails, and I think it's more important to make personal contact with a council member and to also tell your story about why you're concerned. Barbie, what you talked about moving here when you were 8 years old and the differences you've seen, to hear from generations that are profoundly impacted by the work we do, to hear, you know, just direct testimony that decisions you make today, council, are going to impact my life and my children's lives. I mean, I think it helps to bolster the council and give them power and to know that the engagement has been so strong and so vital to this process will be very important to adopting a lot of the features that we are recommending here. So thank you everyone for participating tonight and for your continued engagement, because we definitely need it as the time goes on. And I know Braden and Brianne and other staff, you can't necessarily speak to that issue. You don't have to politicize it. I do, because I'm a council member and I'm just one, and we need 3 more votes. And we have, you know, Councilmember Adams' vote, but because of open meeting law, you probably all know I can't go and solicit other votes. I can only talk to 2 other council members. And so if the public is interested, no matter which interest they have or what position they take, it's really good to reach out to the mayor and to the council and try and make personal connections, and then to speak publicly at the meeting. So thank you so much for giving me the time to speak, Braden. I know you can't speak to those issues, but I can. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Council Member QB. And just a huge thank you to everyone that worked on this plan, including Nick, who's here from Local First. A huge thank you to our Sustainability Commission, including Jake and Barbie that are here. A very big thank you to our staff, including Marcus and Andy and Brianne, who are here tonight. And then, as always, a massive thank you to Shauna Warner and Neighborhood Services for everything that they do. And then also to our community communications and relations team, including Shannon Reed, that do all the communications work for us. One more plug. 9 to 11 Saturday. If you're a Tempe resident, please come get. We have fig trees, pomegranate, jojoba, native mesquites, so many awesome native plants. I think we have 15 pomegranates and 20 fig trees. So we've got some great fruit trees. We got a bunch of great shrubs. Tell anyone you know in Tempe just to stop by between 9 and 11 for a native plant. I really don't want to have to take any to the park's yard. So really appreciate you coming to that event. It's a great open house event. You'll be able to give us input on the climate action plan as well as several other transportation projects. So really hoping to see you there, and please tell people to come pick up plants. Take care. Thanks so much, everyone. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody.